It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality Live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.
We always have that consistent audience clapping for us. I love that. It's great. It'd be awkward if they didn't clap for us at the beginning of the show.
They're so dedicated.
Anyways, yeah, right. They're very dedicated. Anyways, welcome to Talk Heathen, everybody. I'm glad to be back on here. And you heard the docile tones of Mr. Johnny P. Angel right before the show. Johnny, how are you doing today?
I'm well, and I'm glad to be back here and here with you. You're my new favorite co-host.
We're gonna do this each week where you're the favorite for only the week, and then we move on to a new favorite, which is fine. I'll just be my own favorite. And then I'll just solve the issue there. But
I've been excited about this, as I am every time I'm on the show with you, because you're freaking awesome, Mike.
Oh, thank you. I love you. And they prompt me with a nice little koala in the background, and you got a nice. I think we're looking a little spiffy today.
Yeah,
anyways. Talk Heathen is a product of the ACA, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheism and separation of religion and government. There are many ways to support us. I would say, like, the one that I like to talk about at the beginning is to get rid of the, it directly supports us in a lot of ways, but two, it gets rid of that pesky slow mode. And you can look right below the video. There's a join button for members. You click that, and you can, I don't want to say you can comment as many times as you can. That might not, that might get a little annoying after a while. But you can reasonably comment now that you have the restrictions off. And I mean, I think it's a good feature. I think it's a good feature to be able to not wait 2 minutes before you want to say, "Ooh, I didn't like that point. I want to say something now." And then you're sitting there for about 1:45 until you can actually say something.
That's right. Slow mode is a synthoid way of slowing down people who texts too much, message too much, but we still have humanoids, that brilliant, wonderful humanoids that will check you before you have done something to do some wrecking.
Indeed. Well, Johnny, let's just get straight into it. I like getting right into the calls right away, and we have one. So we have one already from a theist, which is an amazing thing from my perspective. I much like the idea of giving the preference to the theist callers. And so we have Josh on, who thinks that free will has to exist, and then a conjunction to that, which is that if it doesn't exist, then punishing criminals is immoral. Josh, you are on with Mike and Johnny. What's going on?
How you guys doing? Hello?
Yep,
we're doing great.
Doing great.
I hear you.
Hello?
Yep.
All right.
Doing great.
Well, basically, my position on free will, in regard, I can get your gentleman's perspective. Do you either one of you believe in free will, or are you guys determinists?
So no, I don't believe in free will. I'm kind of navigating in from compatibilism and determinism, but I've been predominantly a determinist.
Me too, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But how about you?
Okay,
you say that free will has to exist, Josh. So tell us why it has to exist.
Yeah. Well, I believe that there's I feel like atheists tend to dodge this part of the question. Basically, if free will is, as they say, I don't know, some people have different perspectives on it, but if free will is truly an illusion, then atheists had to acknowledge that us punishing criminals is technically immoral, because we're punishing them for something they cannot control.
Yeah, I was going to kind of back up for a second.
Josh, you kind of just skipped over something, Josh. You said free will has to exist. Okay. Why? You just kind of jumped to steps 2 and 3 there.
Yeah, and let me add real fast, like, because you did say atheists like to dodge this, so I don't want this to be prompting you up for what you think that is.
Yeah.
You on the show notes, it says, "I think that free will has to exist," and then you have a conditional statement. The conditional statement is, if it doesn't exist, then punishing criminals is immoral, right? So to be proper, I feel like it'd be best to go at the antecedent, the very first part. I think that free will has to exist. I don't really feel like it's fair for someone just to make that assertion and then go to the implication of the argument. So let's start with the fact that you think free will has to exist.
Yes, why? Give us our reasons why. I know you think it and you believe it, but give us your reasons why we should believe it too.
Whenever you seem to confront like atheists on it, they say, "Oh yeah, well we're still studying it. We don't completely understand it." But human being thinking is way too complex for it to be just cells moving around and making you do certain actions.
Okay, so I'm sorry to cut you off immediately, but we're already on some really bad territory because you're going into like what atheists think. I don't care about that. I don't care about a preamble. I'm not trying to be rude. I care about the argument that you have, or the inductive evidence, abductive assessment, whatever it is that you have, right? Like, what is it that you're presenting for the case that free will has to exist? And if your first words out of your mouth is you or atheists, you've already lost, like, even presenting an argument.
Josh, forget about those pesky atheists. I want you to present your evidence or your argument and evidence in support of your argument. And I think you said thinking is way too complex for a bunch of brain cells like rubbing up against each other or something like that. Could you restate that?
Brains, that's essentially what they think. That's essentially what they think. They don't think that there's an agent making choices. They think it's just cells moving around and reacting to their environment.
All right. So I'm just gonna ignore the they thinking that, because again, I asked you, Josh, to ignore those pesky, mischievous, hijinks-filled atheists and just talk about your evidence for the existence of free will. And so, again, we're trimming it down. We're trimming all the fat off here. And you're saying human thought is too complicated to be attributed to brain cells just interacting. Okay? So why is that?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Because it's based around decisions that are made in regards to people. Like I didn't make the choice. In theory, according to you, I didn't make the choice to call in here today. I'm a product of my environment. I'm doing stuff.
Yeah. So you're kind of begging the question. You're just
right now.
Well, hold on, Josh, real fast. You're just restating the claim.
Yep.
And then you're just saying what it is we believe, which is not good. Like, if we were going to actually try to make progress in the conversation, like, we're not going to make any progress because it seems to be like you're putting up the gloves for some reason. And I'm not understanding why you want to do that. Like, we could make some actual intellectual progress on this and maybe change positions. But when you tell me like atheists think this or they think that, it seems to be very heavily tied emotionally to you. And that to me is already a red flag. The implication we haven't gotten to yet, but you have something emotionally tied there as well. And so for me, I don't give a shit if my feelings correspond to whether or not free will is true or it's not, or whether it is the fact that I'm doing Talk Heathen determined in some aspects of cosmological or biological implications that get me to where I'm at. Like, I'm having the experience. I'm enjoying the experience. Those are
you though, Mike? Are you?
Maybe not. Maybe okay. Maybe not. I don't know.
Checking.
I'm determined to.
Determined to.
But I don't care about how I feel about it, right? Like, I care about what is true. And you seems like you're obfuscating truth with how you feel about truth. And if it was up to me, if I just wanted to believe something, I'd believe in libertarian free will. But I'm not going to kid myself and lie to myself based on the purported evidence to the contrary, right? So what is it like that you have that gets you to free will outside of it's uncomfortable to you? Because that's the only thing all of what you said is translated to me, is that I'm just uncomfortable with the idea of determinism. I don't care about that when I assess truth. You know, that's not why I'm an atheist. It'd be cool to know that I live on and see my family and people like that. And depending on what God, you know, that might be cool, but I don't care about my feelings about it. I care about what points to the case. So what is that for you?
Yeah.
Well, the whole purpose. I didn't call in to say I had proportional evidence to free will. My point.
Well, let's look
was
at the
basically
statement. Let's look at the statement. Your statement is that I think that free will has to exist, right?
Yeah.
You're making a claim. You think it has to exist. You have an implication and a qualifier. Josh, listen real fast. I know I'm not being as fair to you, but we're trying to be systematic on this. You have to look at what your qualifier is. You said has to exist, right? Has to exist means that you have some reasons for why that's the case. What are those reasons? You keep avoiding that part.
I gave you all the reasons. You're basically just saying that it
You
doesn't.
didn't give me a single reason. What was one of the reasons? Restate one of the reasons.
Restate one of the reasons.
Okay.
Maybe we missed it because it does feel. Josh, I'm gonna do this thing again. Cool down. We put on our matching, atheist jumpsuits on one leg at a time. All right. So just walk us through the process, because like I said, I'm not certain whether I have free will or not. I lean toward determinism, but I don't really have an emotional stake in it. I know that the question of free will versus determinism isn't a binary set of propositions. So walk us through your evidence, why you think that free will has to exist, and if it's merely because human thought is so complex it just can't be a result of deterministic forces, then explain to us why that is the case, and then we can go on to your next point. But just asserting a belief is not going to cut it on any of these shows. You're going to have to show your work, and if you can't show your work, then cool story, bro. But really, Josh, come on, give it to us, because this is interesting. We were talking about this before the show. We want to know what you think, because there's lots of ways to approach this conversation.
We cannot function on the basis that free will isn't real. That's what I'm saying. We cannot function on that basis.
That's not an argument. That is not an argument. Josh, that isn't an argument.
It's an assertion.
Accountable.
No. Listen, Josh. That's like saying, like when you say we wouldn't be able to act if it was this case, is not an argument to the positive assertion that you have for the reasons why we should purport our reasoning to the evidence, which is the case that free will exists, or in this case, I guess libertarian free will. Stating that we wouldn't be able to do X if it wasn't is not an argument. That is the second part of this is why we broke this down, right? And if you go back and listen, I specifically went to the verbiage that's used. I think that free will has to exist, and then you have you have a conditional. And if it doesn't exist, or an implication, then it doesn't exist, then punishing criminals is immoral, right? But I want to talk about the independent attestation for the free will has to exist. You keep going to, we wouldn't be able to function. We wouldn't be able to do X, Y, or Z. That's not an argument. That's just stating what you think. I care about the argument, the inductive argument, or the premises, or whatever you have for it, not how you feel.
And it might just be that you can't personally understand how we could function. You haven't asserted why it's logically impossible, or it's just impossible. You're just saying we couldn't. Well, why couldn't we?
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. Why are you criticizing? Why are you criticizing me for my views?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead. I'm muting Josh, and I'll tell you why I'm going to mute Josh, Mike. I don't want to step on your feet as host.
No,
but
you're fine. I feel like I'm stepping on yours, so that's my bad.
No, you're cool, dude. We're all fine here. Josh, calm down. I know that's not what you say to a person when they're agitated, but I can mute him. Josh, it's okay. We're having a conversation here. Slow down. If you say, well, I don't know, or I'm trying to explain it to you guys, but you're too dense, or give me a chance to speak and I will go ahead and explain exactly why. But getting more irritated isn't going to work, because Johnny and Jmike, we're just as zen as fuck. Okay, so go ahead. We'll put you back off mute here. Start over again, please. I know I'm being passive aggressive and snarky. I read the comments. Go ahead. What do you got, Josh, please?
Without the idea of free will, it is basically, even if determinism, that's basically supporting that we are mentally incapable of making our own choices. So let's say for instance, a guy was driving down the street. He had a stroke while driving. He had a stroke. and it impaired him and made him pass out, and he drove off the road and hit somebody and killed them. Would it be wrong to jail that person for something that was mentally incapable of them? They couldn't physically do anything about that. Would it be immoral?
Let me answer, because I'm already mildly frustrated with you, Josh, because you keep going to the implication, and we can get there, right? Like, we can get to where you want to go about the implications of it. But no, stop. I've asked you very specifically for the initial statement that you made, the initial claim, which is that free will has to exist, right? You moved past that. You never gave any argument, any independent attestation for why you think that's the case. You've just moved to the second part, that if it wasn't the case, would we jail this person? We can get there, but I need to know why you think free will even exists in the first place. You have two arguments. You should not have started the argument with free will has to exist when I have problems with that, because we can get into the secondary thing, but you've stated that it has to exist to this call screener. I need to know why you think it exists. You keep going back to moral responsibility. That's fine, but that's not a reason. That's just showing that you feel ways about it, and that's clouding your judgment on what is actually the case based upon the evidence.
Okay, what would hold up as evidence for free will then? Because that is a bogus ass fucking claim.
It's not a bogus ass fucking claim. It's a normal claim, because the fact that you think you can fucking sidestep the rigorous standards we apply in science because it suits your presumption in the first place is not my fucking problem. Because the things I believe in, I don't sidestep that rigorous standard. You might think that that's necessary. Then it is probably necessary to actually get you to holding that position, because the second you actually do go through the process of seeing, hey, peer-reviewed studies, falsification, verification, whatever it might be that lends the purported inductive evidence to the claim. Anytime I have a belief, I have no problem with that. I don't know why you or anybody else would just want to sidestep a pretty good mechanism that we have, and the mechanisms at which are prompting me to believe determinism is true, as opposed to libertarian free will, because, mind you, it fails in every academic account. It just does.
Yeah, Josh, have you done any research, any scientific reading on? Well, I'm sorry, maybe you were talking while I was talking. There is a delay, but to be fair, Josh, have you done any reading on this by neurologists, on people who study cognition, brain scientists? Have you done any reading on this topic?
And I have, and it's very convenient that all of them are atheists, so they're just kind of viewing what they want to view. That's kind of strange.
Josh, you said you've done some reading. I'd like you to name some of the authors that you've read, so that I can read the same stuff that you've read. Because if I read the same stuff that you've read, and I'm an honest interlocutor, okay, stop talking, and I'm an honest interlocutor, then I should come to the same conclusion as you have, or I'm dishonest. Or not as smart as you are. So go ahead and list it, because I will go back and I'll watch this, and I'll go ahead and read the same stuff that you've read. Go ahead, list some people that you've read and the names of those titles if you have them handy.
Well, the one I kept most on because I figured it's most relevant, and I'm sure you know who Sam Harris is. He talks about free will and how he thinks free will doesn't exist, and that basically a rapist is not responsible for what he did, acting on his own chromosomes or the cells that are inside his body. We can't punish him. It would be immoral to punish a rapist, right? Because they can't control themselves.
Wow,
right?
Josh, you're really, really upset about this call. Why are you calling today if you're that upset? Josh, you don't have to talk to us. You can go back to your safe space. Josh. But if you can't, calm down. We're having a conversation. So you read some Sam Harris. Do you have someone else that you would recommend? And what was the particular work by Sam Harris that you read?
It was the what was it? Not moral.
I'm looking at it right now. By the way, it's a really easy book title.
I'll give it to him, Jmike. He's flustered. What do you got?
The moral aspects in the moral landscape, but he has so Sam Harris has a book on free will. It's like 60 something pages, a little red book.
I can read a 50-page book. Yeah, I'll go read it.
It's an interesting read, but
Okay.
First off, like, I'm not sure that. So Sam Harris, that's fine. You can cite Sam Harris, but
Sure.
there are people in philosophy that are necessitarians, right? They're determinists. They believe that God could have only made the world in one way, which to me is like really weird because it's like this idea of like, did he have free will in choosing it? Apparently not. It was not like he necessarily had to create it one way. So this isn't exclusive. It's weird to me that you draw this dichotomy between that because there are theists and there are even people who are necessitarians that don't believe in that type of change. Some of them have variations for sure, but I don't know why you're kind of you have this weird dichotomy. Everything that you've presented to me seems so emotionally based rather than determined on the facts. Because Josh, if I was with you, man, on that assessment, on taking what I believe in, I'd believe in libertarian free will too, because it's convenient for me too, because it seems what I would prefer. I don't care about what I prefer. I care about what is true, which is why I'm navigating between compatibilism and determinism. Though, it's something that's admittedly it's hard to make progress in, but you don't get progress done by calling into a show and being pissed off. You just don't.
Yeah.
And also you don't make progress if you don't address how you came to the conclusion that free will has to exist. Because it seems that if I was to rephrase your argument, or at least not the argument, but the call screen thing that I have, which says, I think free will has to exist. And if it doesn't, then punishing criminals is immoral. It seems that you start with that idea that punishing criminals is immoral. And then you add, well, I'm uncomfortable with it, so therefore free will has to exist. This is why I pressed you on whether or not you could just independently verify the first part for me, because it seems you're not starting there, right? This is like what I would say to certain, I'm not going to name them, but certain Christian philosophers of big names that I would say they're a Christian first and then a philosopher second. And to me, it seems that you're doing a very similar tactic, and that you're starting with, oh crap, if this isn't true, then that means a whole bunch of implications about moral responsibility that I'm not comfortable with. Well, guess what? That is no indication of whether or not it's true. And if the universe doesn't care about those things, it doesn't care about your feelings in that sense, that's the way it is. For me, as a subjective agent that can handle my feelings, I'm going to try to relate that to reality and recognize that might not be reciprocated back to me. But that's the only way from my perspective that you can get to truth.
Jmike, we could generously step into the next part of his argument. Punishing criminals is immoral if free will doesn't exist. I would also reject that assertion as well, because if no free will exists,
Why?
I'll tell you why, Josh.
The because part, I think, was part of the explanation.
I'm glad you asked. Because let's say, for example, that a human being, my conscious mind is merely the bob floating at the end of a fishing line, and it's subject to the ups and downs, the waves, the wind of the massive ocean or lake of experiences and causes behind it, that have caused me to make a decision independent of any free will. Well, then by putting someone in jail, by fining them, by removing them from society for a period of time, or by taking action to change their behavior, you are changing the factors that cause them to behave that way in the first place. And so if it's not their conscious mind making the decision to take a certain action, there's some sort of calculus going on in the individual that is causing them to behave a certain way. And you're just changing those factors, and therefore hopefully you change that behavior, whether free will, based on free will, or determined by the past. In any event, as a person who lives in society, I don't want to be near people who rape, murder, and steal from me. And so I'm going to band together with others who will agree that if one of our people in society chooses to act that way, that we're going to remove them from society for a period of time, keep them away from us so that they don't harm us. And of course, that's balanced with mercy and the understanding that if we were somehow found guilty, we wouldn't want to be thrown in prison forever and ever and tortured and all that kind of stuff, because we don't recognize that as the kind of society that we want to live in or be subject to those laws. And different societies strike a different balance. And so it doesn't seem to be one set way that human beings deal with crime and criminality. Some of them are very rehabilitative.
Societies do not follow that landscape, though. The landscape is you are responsible for your actions. You are subject to a punishment. Is the punishment part is it not even worthwhile to punish a criminal? Or we're just removing him from society and hope he changes after he rapes someone or something like that.
Yeah. So this is something that so I had a debate recently with somebody against a position they hold on morality that I don't feel really works at all in any way, but they have parts in their meta-ethical thesis that I think actually rings true in a lot of ways, that I think is actually pretty intuitive and is potentially a good stumbling block in these types of conversations. And what I would say to that is this idea of limitations, right? We have certain pragmatic limitations. Like the more that we have technological advances, it seems the more we have the ability to intervene under certain moral dilemmas. I think the example that they gave me, which was far-fetched, but if we had the ability to kind of zap people in and out of where they were or put a force field on them, we would do that in, say, the trolley problem, right? We would have that limitation. Clearly, we don't have that. And so morality deals necessarily with what we can do at the time. I gave this example kind of to Johnny in the back, and he might not agree. It's something that I'm still kind of thinking about, but if you did some action and your goal was to save 1,000 people or whatever it might be, right? You had some goal with what you determine as a good outcome, but the outcome is actually bad. It actually affects 10,000 people negatively, or does something where it's more detrimental. Well, it doesn't matter. You're still morally responsible for the consequences of the action, because it didn't matter if it was against your volition, your will to do otherwise. If it resulted in several thousand people dying, you're morally responsible. And I would argue that most people that are in moral dilemmas, I shouldn't have done that, they didn't have the intention of I want to, in their mindset, I want to do this. It's just the way that it is. And we look at the consequent of the matter. Now that gets into the whole philosophy of consequentialism and deontology and all these types of things. But that's something I would look into, because there are answers to this and beyond just accepting kind of defeat. But it seems like you're starting with, this makes me uncomfortable, and therefore free will has to exist. That's weird to me.
Yeah, it is a little unusual. Well, not too unusual on these shows, but Jmike, Josh, I do care about justice being served. I care about the rights of the accused, and I care about the innocent who have been subject to crimes, who have had their bodies, their peace of mind, their psychology, their possessions affected by the selfish actions of others. I am also aware that a person who, a lot of times people who commit heinous actions are themselves the victim of heinous actions, and the cycle continues. That doesn't mean that we give them a free pass, that we can't punish them. And by punish, I don't think, I know that Jmike and I are not talking about strapping them to the wheel of pain and causing them agony, but we a lot of times need to remove these people from society. It sounds patronizing, but it's like a timeout. We need to evaluate whether or not they're suitable to return to society. Ideally, there's rehabilitation programs, there's therapy. Some places put more emphasis and energy and resources into fixing what caused an offender to commit those actions that are not in the best interest of society and the individuals in it. Some places will cut off heads.
Stop.
Hold on. Okay, I'm muting you right now, Josh.
You can
I'm
stop
muting you
when
right
you
now.
get your own show to stop people.
You go get your own show, Josh. And I'm just going to monologue now, Josh. So thank you for letting me do that. I appreciate it. But with all that said, the different societies strike different balances. Like I said, some of them cut people's heads off. They will tolerate no thieves. They cut off hands. They some places, I think in Scandinavia, they have super hippy dippy, touchy feely prisons where no one can be in isolated, solitary confinement. And there are problems when somebody is so dangerous that they will harm whoever is placed in close proximity with them. And yet their laws prevent and if I got this wrong, chat, I'm sure you'll let me know. They will hire people to hang out with those people. Different societies strike a different balance, and that's an indicator to me that we're all just trying to figure out how to deal with the concept of antisocial, selfless versus selfish actions. And so I can't tell you whether there's free will in any real sense or not, or whether we are determined by factors beyond our control. But I think the way we treat people who take antisocial actions, provided that we're trying to change the behavior and get them out of that role, I don't think it really matters. It's more of a philosophical question, but as a practical level, we deal with criminals in order to prevent them from doing it, because we can't kill them all. It would be wrong for us to kill people for every infraction, but we do want to change behavior. I'm going to unmute you. I hope that you're going to come back, Josh, with a cooperative endeavor to sort of like flesh this out, and not to accuse me, Jmike, or all the atheists of the world of giving criminals a free pass. And here goes the unmute. Let's see what you can do. Go ahead. You are unmuted.
Okay. Well, I wasn't trying to jump on your statement and run the show or anything.
Okay.
Hello.
Cool.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to interrupt you there. I was telling you that I was making you acknowledge of a statement you just said.
Oh, okay, great. What do you got? What did I say?
Hello.
Yes. What did I say? What did I say?
You made a statement based on an assessment that free will was subjectal, right? You said it was a subjection, that people can make individual choices and then get punished for them. Oh, it's about controlling society. Well, that's not really a valid argument. That's an argument you're making in the place that we don't, and that you just consume everything you know about free will, basically.
So are you saying that?
Radical
I think I know where you're going, Josh. I think I know where you're going, Josh. I think I know where you're going, Josh. I think that when I talked about individuals who make
do you know
certain,
anything about that?
He's trying to answer you.
I'm
Will you
trying
shut
to,
up?
Josh. There's a delay. Josh,
Look, I'm ready
there's
to
a
move
delay.
on. I'm about to.
I think we gotta. I think I heard the word asshole, which might be appropriate. Let's just move on.
He didn't. Josh, call back. Present his argument for free will, like literally argument, and that's where my frustration lies, because you laid it out very specifically. If it seemed to be, to me, you had it backwards to say that you assessed things that you were uncomfortable with moral responsibility and accountability, and then you determined though free will must not exist, which in a syllogism is called affirming the consequent. It's a fallacy. So I would look into that. But anyway, the main point that I wanted to rub up against is the fact that you said it has to be the case that free will must exist. I'm trying to think of how the way to word that. If that is the case, right? If it's the case that it must be the case, then you have some supporting data which you could provide for that. It doesn't seem that you had that. It seemed that it was actually your implication of how uncomfortable it made you feel, and therefore now you can somehow determine that it has to be the case based upon emotional feelings. That was my counter to his. So I would rather see him come in and say, hey, nope, I'm not affirming that. What I'm trying to do is actually say that I have independent reasons beyond just the way I feel about it.
Anyway. We get a lot of calls, and they're primed for a fight. They're primed for a shouting match or something like that. Hey, sure. All the people in the queue and folks thinking about calling in, I am afraid to even say this. You can't make me yell at you. The worst you're going to get out of me is a bemused face, snarkiness that you're going to want to punch me in the face, and I'm going to be confused as to why you're so agitated. Sure. But we're just having conversations here. We really are. Jmike and I are having conversations with friends and maybe some loyal opposition. Yeah. So, Mike, I like Andrew from Canada.
Well, yes. Well, before I have a couple questions. Well, one, I want to ask you a question, but I'm going to ask you the question. Okay. I'm going to build the question because I want to ask you, and it has to do with what you're doing right now, actually. Right. Well, first off, I would say, so if you want to support us, by the way, we have a below the live chat, I believe there's a fundraiser option. all that money goes 100% to us, and YouTube doesn't cut it out. As somebody who themselves, you know, in my own endeavors have seen the YouTube thing like that, if you really want to help support us, 100% of it goes to the ACA, which helps fund everything that we can to put on the show. Some aspects supporting my back and microphones and all these types of things that where we can comfortably do the show and consistently. And so just much wanted to kind of announce that if you wanted to go a step beyond, that would be a really good way to help us, as well as being a member. And then also, this might be a lot of hair for you, or maybe less hair if I'm hosting with Matt or Johnny. And so maybe you want to just not see us. Well, the Atheist Experience Network has a whole list of podcasts that you can get at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. And the crew has put up that, as well as all of our affiliated channels, and go check them out as well. But yeah, my thing that I wanted to get to with you is, are you drinking out of a spoon or a straw? Like, what
haven't we talked about this, Jmike?
We might have, but
I'm drinking my solid. I'm drinking my yerba mate, but it
looks like you're literally put a spoon and you're just like sipping out of it.
It's a highly caffeinated drink. I don't know if it's good for you. Caffeine probably has its own problems, but when old Johnny's got to get out of bed and he's got to get awake right quick, he drinks his yerba mate. And here I am, with you and all of our friends listening.
Does Donnie drink out of a regular straw and Johnny drinks out of what looks like a fucking spoon?
I don't know. They've never met each other.
Okay.
They've never met each other.
So yeah, actually, you prompt the next caller. I would like for you to, because I think we have a lot of theist options and I can't decide. So
no, I will decide for you this time.
Ooh.
And so we've got Andrew from Canada who would like to ask us our opinion on what God's grace is. I'm going to answer this one, Andrew. I don't believe that there is a God, and I don't therefore believe that there is such a thing as God's grace. But do you?
Not quite the answer I was looking for. Basically, I can remember sitting in my car before I went to work multiple times going, it seems like God's grace is God lets you do whatever you want. And then I just kind of stopped there because I didn't know where to go from there.
Andrew, Morgoth's wrath, Morgoth's maliciousness, is that what prevented my car from starting that one late November morning in 1996? And is it just that
great year?
Yeah. Morgoth's wrath and God's grace. Do you believe in Morgoth's wrath and maliciousness?
Actually, yeah. Because why would my life be so hard with so many people hurting me if God didn't have wrath?
Well, I'm talking about Morgoth. I'm talking about the big bad from the Silmarillion, Sauron's boss, one of the Valar, one of the Ainur, one of the children of Iluvatar, not to be confused with men and elves, but one of the earliest creations of Iluvatar. So what is the state of Morgoth, who became Melkor, enemy of all mankind? So why not Melkor's vindictiveness, wrath, viciousness? What is your opinion on that?
I have no opinion on that. You are talking about the Lord of the Rings. However, I've only heard those names. I have no clue what you are talking about.
Okay. Well, I've never met God. I don't believe that God exists. I don't believe that grace exists. It sounds like an interesting concept. I know that Melkor, who became Morgoth, twists the creations of the Valar into vicious creations. I know he does that because it's written down in a book. How do you know that God has grace that God bestows upon God's children?
I think that's the point at which I didn't know where to go. It did, like I said, it seems like God lets you do whatever you want.
And then
Okay,
I was like,
threshold question, Andrew. Threshold
how does
question.
God-
Okay. You're calling into Talk Heathen, and I know that maybe you don't know this. Maybe you do know this. This is a show where at least Jmike and I, we do not hold that God exists. We do not hold the belief that God exists. Um, I would go so far as to
Right,
say
and-
that I believe that plenty of those gods definitely don't exist because they're impossible. But rather than getting down that path, which would take us probably the rest of today to answer, and there'd be many stumbling blocks along the way for me, not for Jmike. We don't believe that a God exists, so we don't believe that uh, God has grace. So you're jumping over grace.
Right, and
Okay.
I think I gotta find my words at this point. When I say it seems like God lets you do whatever you want, then now that I've considered becoming an atheist, I go, well, it seems like if God lets you do whatever you want, then God really isn't needed at all.
God does let you do whatever you want, right? I mean, you can murder 1,000 million trillion human beings if you can find them, and then you can either you can go to hell or go to oblivion, or you could accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and personal Savior just before death, just as they're coming to get you or put you on the electric chair or lethal injection place, and then you can go to heaven. Right. So you can always do whatever you want. In my world, I can do whatever I want, and I do whatever I want, but I don't want to harm people. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to have their family members come and hunt me down and make me wish that I hadn't done the things that I did. I don't want the IRS to get me. I don't want law enforcement to do bad things. Though in some instances, if I'm a real harmful actor, or if I'm behaving in a way consistent with the deterministic forces in my life, do antisocial activities, perhaps I'm just, like I said, a bob floating on the surface of determinism. But I do what I want. We all do what we want, God or not God, right?
Right. And I suppose that's essentially the hanging point for me. Other people have hurt me, and other people have hurt me in the name of God. And then I go, well, did they get to go to heaven and God's going to make this right somewhere along the way? And as I said, I seem to be in this place where it just seems like there's no use or need for God.
So I have a weird spot with this, because you're talking about, like, especially when you say, like, in virtue of someone hurting you, through God or something. Well, for me, like, it sounds like you're just saying there's a correlation between, like, or you think there's some correlation there, but to me it seems that there's some pattern of that people can act pretty crummy and people can act in ways that aren't that, and they can apply some entity like God for the reason why they kind of endow that on you. But for me, it's weird because, like, when you ask the question at the beginning of, like, talking about God's grace, it seems that you're not only sneaking the ontological basis of, like, God in the first place, but then also, like, attributes attributed to God. So, like, I'm already not going to agree with some of these things, right? Like that God, that there is a God, and then that there's this attribute of grace or anything. So my thing is, like, it seems like similar to me saying, like, John, if I just started with John has good genes, and then I use that to get to the reason of why he won the race. Like, it seems backwards in the sense of that the information I'm going to have starts with, well, what do I know? Well, I know that there was a race. I know that races are determined by, like, who runs faster than the other person or whatever, it's defined as in that circumstance. And then you get to, like, John wins the race. Well, then what else does that infer to me? Well, through, like, biological studies and things of that and anatomy, well, then I can find out, like, oh, well, we found out about these things called genes, and then we can kind of relate the attributes between, like, genes to the fact that Joe can run fast. So, but if I had started with the ontology of genes existing, right, the way that you start with God and his grace, like, I'm potentially doomed on every step after that if I'm wrong, as opposed to starting with epistemology and going, hey, well, what do I know about the situation? Well, okay, well, I know there has to be a reason why John ran faster. And once I go through an epistemic like inquiry, then I come to the conclusion that, oh, there's these things called genes. And so that's why this whole thing for me is a little weird. Maybe I'm hearing it wrong, but it seems like you're starting with the ontology and then working backwards. And I just always oppose that type of view.
Let me state it again, as well as explain a little bit more. Right now, I'm kind of in that halfway, or maybe even like 75 atheist, 25 Christian. But what I'm stating is that when I was a Christian, I would sit there and I would say, like, so many Christians have hurt me so much. Like, what is God's grace? And now that I'm in this, 75, 25 place, it seems like God lets you do whatever you want. Well, then where's God? What good is God if just life happens the way it is meant to happen?
I got this, Mike.
So
go ahead, Andrew.
I think I'm finished, unless there's some more confusion and I got to explain myself better. It certainly sounded a lot better in my head than the way it came out.
Sure.
Hey,
It's a theme for myself as well.
Yeah, as well as me too. Also me. Andrew, I think, Tolkien notwithstanding, I think what you're dealing is you're leaving a belief system and the insufficient explanations inherent to that belief system, that God loves you, God protects you, that there's justice in the universe, that if you behave a certain way, then you will win, I guess. And you're seeing the cracks.
I have believed that, but no, I haven't. Yeah, I have believed that, yet I have not received anything good.
Sure. There's cracks in that. Like, wait a second, that didn't happen. Or if you pray real hard, you're going to get what you want, or you're going to get something else that's better, or at least more useful to you, or God's teaching you a lesson, or you need to learn humility, or whatever it is. Okay, it's counting the hits and ignoring the misses. Okay, and so now what you're trying to do is you're fading away from what you are perhaps realizing is an unsupported belief in a metaphysics, and you're still trying to apply the tools that were in that toolbox to understand the world around you. What we're saying is this, that human beings can be very wonderful to each other or very cruel to each other, or anything in between, indifferent to each other. And that God's grace doesn't really factor into any of this if you don't believe in God. That sometimes people get away with it. They don't deserve it, but they get away with it. And in society, we've sort of banded together to prevent not only people from getting away with it, but trying to get people to not even commit these terrible actions to each other to begin with. And we do that by having close connections with each other. And yet there will still be those who try to game the system. Okay. So if God's grace seems like a pass, and it kind of does in that mythology, it kind of does seem like a pass. Kind of like if the Eagles were to carry Frodo in the ring to Mount Doom, that would be a pass by Manwë and ultimately by Iluvatar. But the truth is, life is hard, and it's wonderful. It's ecstatic. It's struggle. It's a test. It's a lot of things, and there are no easy, good answers. And the only way you can really navigate the vicissitudes of life is through patience and determination and compassion and caution and bravery and all of these other things, hard work. And maybe you'll never get that, well, that's not fair, but there'll be a comeuppance eventually. That's great. You've heard probably your parents tell you, well, that's life, kid. It's not fair. Well, that's life. Well, that's life. And sometimes these terrible people acting under the aegis of whatever God they believe in will say they can do whatever they want because this is what God tells them to do. Suspiciously, God tells them to do what they already want to do a lot of times. And so I guess as you go along in this journey, and maybe you'll go closer to a God belief, a different God belief, a more holistic God belief that incorporates human experience more and the realities of human society and the human biology and psychology and such, or you will step away entirely and realize the whole thing is, at least the belief system of the people around you who are using this in a hypocritical way, are just full of shit. And you'll need to distance yourselves or compartmentalize them into a category of potentially harmful people. But that's all I got. So I think forget about God's grace for now. Figure out, is there a God? Do you believe in a God? And if you don't believe in a God, don't worry about God's grace. Just realize that sometimes people are shit.
Yeah.
But they're not always shit. Sometimes they're great, like Jmike.
Well, that's a compliment, but
oh, you're shitty too sometimes, Jmike.
yeah,
sure.
Thank you.
I'm sure.
I was like, let's be fair.
Is that good? Do you think is that answer your question, Andrew? And you got anything else?
I think it does. I think to flesh it out a little bit more, I have gotten angry on multiple occasions. Like, why do I have to live life? Well, A, you have lived life, and B, maybe in the areas that you have not lived life, Andrew, you need to, grow up and live life more. So yeah, you guys have answered the question quite well. Yeah. Yeah.
Andrew, thank you so much for calling. I think the only way out is through. Persevere through the difficult times in life. Find people who support you in good, healthy activities. Grow as a person. Grow past those people. The best vengeance for people like that, the naysayers, the haters, the difficult people who are after, they have some creep agenda, is a life well lived. So live that good life. Okay. And call back with your progress, please. I want to hear how you are in 6 months. All right.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Right, yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah. So like my kind of point that I was trying to make sure I wasn't missing the mark, but it's this idea that I feel like people kind of start with some ontological base, like this thing exists. And I'm always like, well, like, will we do that for genes? No. I mean, we would follow like an epistemic route to get you to like what that thing is. And then in philosophy, some people will even argue that it doesn't tell you that, but you get 3 philosophers in the room and they'll tell you that there's not 3 philosophers in the room. So there's that as well. But, anyway, so I wanted to mention two things that are probably the most important to me, from the announcement standpoint. If you really like the discussions that we're having and you want to continue those discussions, we have a Facebook group. Well, I'll go to the Discord first. Actually, it's tiny.cc/ACA Discord, where you can have live chats after the show. Really, at any time, even days where we're not doing any ACA stuff at all, there's people in there hanging out. Sometimes they do. I've been in there where they've done, just games or just talking about different things, philosophy, religion, things outside of that. So that's a really good tool. But the Facebook group as well, it's a Facebook, both of these are fan run, but the Facebook group is FG or facebook.com/ I think it's groups now / Talk Heathen FG. I think before the groups wasn't there. So make sure you add the groups part to that if that has changed. The reason why I mentioned that they're important is that the reason I'm in the chair I'm in is from interacting with a lot of people through groups like that. Most of the people I know in the scene, in terms of the scene, what do I sound like? I'm in sneaker culture or something, like buying Nikes in the scene. But people I know in the community, I don't have many people around myself, and I feel like that's a common thing that we get a lot, is complaints of like, hey, I don't know people, I feel like I'm isolated. You're not. We've all heard it a billion times, and I quickly realized that I'm not, and then it got me into arguments and debates, and now I'm doing what I love to do. So I stress that as a point to look into those things. Yeah. But if you have missed this week's shows, such as because we have a whole umbrella of shows. If you're not familiar, we have Talk Heathen, this show. We have Truth Wanted, Secular Sexuality, The Atheist Experience, the flagship show, The Nonprofits, produced by yours truly, Johnny P. Angel.
Bet your sweet ass.
And so if you have missed any of those, well, here's a clip on what you potentially missed and why you shouldn't.
Yeah, I feel like you and I are on our way to like an escalating war of obnoxiousness to see who can get the best soundbite in each and every week. So now that we're both here, it's in competition.
The Pfizer vaccine and all the other ones are real. You guys should go get it if you haven't already. And I would say, yeah, you can stop watching the show and go get yourself an appointment to do that. I'm okay with that.
I had told you from the very beginning that this was a good idea. And don't you go showing me clips of me saying the opposite thing, because I'm just going to come up with some other bull.
I don't give a about Matt Dillahunty right now. All right, let's forget
No offense,
about
Matt.
Yeah,
No
no.
offense.
Well, you know what you can do, Matt.
The next time God shows up, ask him why he's a who will show himself to you, but not to me, and then ask him what number I'm thinking of, and call me back.
I love those. I want to break the mold a little bit because the people responsible for that just deserve the credit as they deliver it to us. Can we get a crew cam shot? I know I'm stepping in here early, but yeah, I just want to give major props to everybody in the crew cam, especially the door to the left. That door does a lot of work. You would be surprised on what a door can do.
Opens a lot of doors for us on the show.
It opens up a lot of doors.
Yeah,
we're gonna be great dads with our dad jokes. I think so. Anyway, yeah. So, did you want to move? Did you want to move on? Do you want me to pick a caller this time?
You pick a call. I feel like I've picked the last one. I think I did.
I learned about this when I was a kid. It's called sharing. It goes a long way. So I'm gonna go to we have another theist. So I'm always a priority theist guy. So no offense to atheist callers that call in. We got John in Illinois, however you want to, Illinois. Anyway, I'll stop. My dad jokes are over. I can't do them anymore.
You're done.
Okay. Anyway,
time.
So we have John.
Hey guys,
theists using vaccines rather than trusting God, which I think is an interesting topic. What's your position?
Yeah, what's your position?
First of all, hey guys, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Yeah.
How are you?
What you got, John?
I should ask you, I guess.
Yeah, how are you? Yes.
I'm doing fine. I'm just calling about Johnny's erectile dysfunction.
Oh boy.
Johnny, do you have erectile dysfunction?
Not that I know of.
It was a long way to wait.
Yeah, it was a long time to wait. He waited 34 minutes.
34 minutes
to make a stupid joke. John, that's you got better use of your time. I wanted to talk about the vaccine.
Honestly, I think you violated the law of identity, and it's actually you somehow. I don't know how, but you're doing it. Yeah, that's a long way to wait for a 1 minute long conversation.
Yeah. You could have done a little bit better than that. Come on. I'm not going to encourage people to make stupid jokes, but if you're going to call in and try to prank the show, lead us along for a little bit longer. Have us engage in a conversation about whether God is necessary for there to be laws in the world. Get us to engage. Get us on the hook. Hook us. And then say, Johnny, you got erectile dysfunction. Ha, ha, ha. But let's move on to another one.
Yeah, we will. But
you want to address that?
No, well, it's not about addressing. It's just the fact that the thing that's starting to kind of bother me now in the retro is more the fact that you would use something as critical in a situation we're at right now, like vaccines and people that are denying them, people that are dying in virtue of their beliefs informing the actions, just to use that for you to call into a YouTube show that I don't know. Are you gonna show it to somebody and go, look what I did? I don't know. That whole thing. It seems like clearly you won't, because you'd be embarrassed by it as well. So again,
it's not that we're wrestling villains or anything like that, but
heels is what they're called, John.
Yeah, heels. Not that we're heels, but the negative energy does fuel us a little bit. We like the positive stuff, but we need quality negative energy, not bro stupid stuff. Come on, that's not even. You're not even near the edge on this one. Get better. You can do better next time. All right. I want you to pick another one, because I don't want that to be your pick, and then you feel that you can't pick.
Yeah, it's like we did this sharing thing, and
sharing is caring, and I care about you making the right decision. So what do you got?
Let's go Roberto in Italy. How a universe produce a conscious mind without God? I think that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Especially considering everything we know about the universe and causal relations seems to be dependent upon minds in that sense. I don't know how you would have that prior. But anyway, Roberto, what's your position on that? And thank you for calling. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Roberto.
Yeah, I don't have a position. I'm just calling to ask you guys. Maybe you know more than me.
Oh,
we don't know that. Do you have any expertise in this area? And you might be quite knowledgeable. You might know a lot more than us.
Well, I can actually tell you right now, because we have produced consciousness in the universe without a God. It seems to be we've not needed to add that assumption in any way in terms of our mechanisms of how we look at things in neuroscience or even psychology. None of that's really needed, right? It's kind of a closed causal sequence from the standpoint of like, sure, we don't have every component, but at any point, I don't think we're adding God to it. And then when you talk about God, right, you talk about something that potentially some theists argue prior to t equals 0. And by that, I mean kind of the up for grabs state of, the singularity to the universe. I don't see necessarily how you argue for something. This is a similar argument towards causality as a metaphysical thesis rather than a physical one. It's like, I don't know how you argue for that outside or beyond t equals 0, because it seems that for what we know constitutes a mind is a very long process, more so towards the back end of where we're at now than it does seem to be a fundamental part of nature. But yeah, you could get into routes of idealism and things like that, I'm sure. But yeah, I would say that that's kind of just begging the question without the kind of substrate that's needed in order for you to get there, which would be matter from my perspective.
You said substrate. Jordan, am I on the line with Jordan Peterson? What's going on here?
The axiomatic. I won't do it.
I'm with Mike on this one. We know we have consciousness and we don't think we have a God. I think you've got all the problems of explaining consciousness with a God, because where did this God come from? Now you have to explain not only just a limited being that's around for a little while and can do certain things. Now you have to explain the existence of an omnipotent, infinite being, or at least highly non-finite being. I don't think you sort of jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, Roberto. But what are your thoughts on this? How do you produce a conscious mind without God, the universe? What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know. I'm confused a little bit. I might say that, do you guys think that the consciousness, like, for example, my consciousness had a beginning somewhere, or your consciousness, did it have a beginning? Your personal consciousness.
So I don't really like the verbiage of when someone talks about, it's like similar to like the first premise of the Kalam, when you talk about something beginning to exist. This is just language we use that has methodological utility. It doesn't actually have epistemic justification from like we can use these kind of concepts of cause and effect, but that doesn't satisfy like the causal skeptic or someone that doesn't, or maybe like a David Hume or people that might take a Humean approach to causality, where you're in this situation of like, it's, to me, it seems you're taking a perspective at which I at least I would say for causal relation, right? Like that's going to exist within kind of the arena, so to speak. Like, I guess it goes back to the whole beforehand thing. I'm not understanding how you would apply that as a fundamental feature, like consciousness in general, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm referencing what point you're at.
Like for example, you did not exist as a Mike before, let's say you were born or something, yeah? Can you go back? Can your consciousness go back to the eternity? Like, can you remember yourself as existing back to the eternity, for the eternity, no?
Yeah, I'm failing to understand what me remembering what that point would be relevant to. Because clearly
That
none
means
of us
that
are going to
you,
remember
at
that.
some point, yeah, but that means that at some point you had a beginning. Your persona had a beginning at some point, which means that it did not exist before that point. It cannot go back to the eternity. It hadn't.
Well, so that's the issue I'm having, is that, like, so if you say it had a beginning, I'm okay with using that, like I said, from a methodological, like, utility standpoint, of that we can talk like this and you can understand what I mean, that my parents had, you know, sex and then I existed, and at some point during that I had consciousness, and you could, but at what point you go, right here I had consciousness, what was the antecedent cause that gave me that, when do I, that seems to me like that's the whole venture of what we're trying to discover. I don't know how much kind of philosophical armchair thought can provide any basis when we're going to need to inductively assess these things through science, it seems.
Roberto, it sounds like you are starting to think about this issue. I don't think that there's a lot of meat on the bones, sorry vegans, of this topic. So I'm not particularly interested in your call, Roberto, but I do appreciate you calling. Mike, you got this. I'm fine with moving
well,
on.
I would just
No
ask.
worries.
Yeah.
Roberto, I would just add a question. Like, what is the hang up for you? You're saying, like, you know, how could it be the case that there's consciousness without a God? Like, I mean, why do you? It seems to me like you're kicking the can down the road to start with consciousness in order to account for it, which seems to be like a what you would call inferring the
No,
whole
like,
based upon
actually,
the
I was.
parts. So what's
Yes,
your position? Like, why is that a struggle for you?
Well, the whole thing is like confusing because, like, for example, let's say me as a Roberto, I had a beginning, and the funny thing is, like, before that beginning, I did not exist. My persona did not exist, and then it just somehow it came into existence.
Well, so that
and
depends on how you define
existence?
it. This goes. So sorry to cut you off, but right, like you say, Roberto existed at some point. It's like, well, the matter and the energy we have that are changing form have existed prior, but it's going to be dependent on what state you say this is Roberto. And then if you look into like cell regeneration, like after 10 years, is that the same Roberto? It's just like the ship of Theseus kind of problem, where that's why I'm stating it just has some methodological utility. We can use it to communicate and know what I mean by this carpenter made a table begin to exist. He used non-table material like lacquer and nails, and he created a table. But the thing is that at what point do you really say that this thing was actually that? So the whole beginning thing trips me up on the whole call, because it's the same reasons why I kind of reject the first premise, is that I just don't think it has any epistemic value. I think it just has value in the way we manipulate language.
But do you agree? Do you agree that no, I'm not talking about language. I'm talking about the persona, the consciousness. We the three of us agree that we exist, and you are Mike, he's Johnny, I'm Roberto. We agree about this, yeah? I'm not talking about the language, I'm talking about consciousness. So at some point,
language is baked into a lot of that, though. But yes, they're like, yeah. Then you get into that philosophical perspective of, am I the same person 10 years later when I've had every cell regenerate in my body? Well, I mean, we're probably going to say this is a whole philosophical problem of identity and what it constitutes to sustain identity over time.
Are you saying that the atoms, before I was created, are you saying that the atoms, my atoms, they identify as Roberto?
No,
he's not saying that.
No, because that's the language part that you pack on to a collection of trillions upon trillions of different molecular interactions, right? So like that's where the language part gets baked into it, because we have to subjectively assess the physical phenomena that is going on, right? And you can just categorize those things into that. There's a position called mereological nihilism, which is a position that like essentially is kind of like there are no composite objects, there's no wholes, right? Everything is, you could kind of look at everything's changing form, and so nothing's really a thing, right? So this is a whole what you're raising is a I don't think a thing that's made a lot of progress in philosophy in itself. But I don't know what limit that reaches to God in any way or consciousness, because to me, when we look at these things from a part basis, I can see why consciousness is an emergent property based on what we know. But if you start, like I said with the last caller, if you start with God as your ontology at the beginning, like, then you're just working from the bottom or the top down as opposed to the bottom up. But I don't know if that makes any sense. We don't have very much time left on callers. So I'm sorry to kind of get the broomstick out.
Thanks, guys, for taking my call. No, it was perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully that gives you some. I would look. Yeah, definitely. It sounds like you're interested in identity and problems of identity over time and persistence of identity. That's a really fun thing in philosophy to look at. I don't think you'll make as much progress as anyone else has, because it's
just do some reading. Do some reading on it. Look at contemporary scientific understanding of consciousness to fuel the fire, and then refer it back to some philosophical readings on this. But yeah, keep reading, and then call back if you have maybe a more focused question. Your question doesn't seem particularly focused, and that's not a bad thing. You're starting it. But
no, I actually really, I like Roberto's call. I think it's just, my thing is, this is not a failed venture in philosophy, but it's, when I say you probably won't make progress, it's nothing towards you individually. It's just to say that I don't think that there's been a lot of meat on the bones in terms of progress on this discourse in philosophy.
Yeah.
But anyway,
okay.
Thanks, guys. Have a nice day.
Yeah,
Thank you. Take care.
Appreciate it. All right, that gets me to my favorite time of the show.
I've never done it. Can I do it this time?
You know
Your
what?
favorite time of the show?
You know what? It'll make me look good in front of the audience to give up something that's valued to me to someone else. Oh, I just gave away the secret to looking good. Okay, yeah, you go. So
Jmike is a river to his people. We've got the top 5 patrons that we'd like to read off right now. We've got Eric Tweet, CJ Dennis, Dingleberry Jackson, Balaam's Donkey, Paul Leah, and an honorary mention to the great North American Dingaloo. I was upgrading him to all of the Americas, but he's just North American Dingaloo, or she or they.
I think I said Dingalo like the first 5 times I did it, so I apologize to them if that was wrong. It's definitely Dingaloo.
Yeah, thank you for your contribution. We do appreciate the your contributions go to putting out more content and to getting the message out and to do the good work of the ACA. I do appreciate it.
Well, so now I guess I can switch it back to you. You can choose, because we're playing this game of sharing.
We're playing this game of sharing, but who will win the game of sharing? I think that everyone wins, including the viewers.
When you share, everyone wins. That's what I was told, at least.
I want to talk to Jared in Indiana, whose question is the host's opinions about extremists in the church and how to discuss it with family when you are out of the church. You're on the line with Jmike and Johnny P. Tell us a little bit more. Like, is this something you're dealing with personally?
Yeah, kind of. Yes. Through a text message, I had asked my family's opinion on an extremist group. And my family was first off, didn't want to respond. And so then I sent them some of their literature, and I was just like, hey, they're nationwide. You guys, where you live, you should be aware of some of their symbolism. To which my family then started to more of respond with, well, people nowadays you got to be careful with using the word extremist. People aren't always that extreme. And it seemed like they were more sympathizers. And how do you have a conversation with your family at that point?
I'd say get specific. I would say don't do an editorial on a particular group, because they might have incomplete information or very different information that is more complete than yours. I would say if there is something that is extreme or dangerous or whatever, or maybe something they would find objectionable, I would focus on that aspect of it first and let them come to the conclusion that that's an extremist position. rather than saying, "Hey, these people are cuckoo crazy, baddies," right? And they're like, "Well, actually, no, they have some very good
Mhm.
beliefs in this," and I think you're just gonna you're gonna taint everything that you've said up to that point. I have sort of had to deal with that with family members where they believe certain speakers, and if I just say, "Yeah, that orange man's a real piece of shit," um, that that piques my mother's dander. No, you don't pique dander. I don't know what you do with dander, but it puts her on the defensive, and now she feels that she has to defend all of her other opinions about this person who's a good Christian man, apparently, um, rather than say, "How do you feel about this particular thing that's being done?" "Oh, I don't think that he's really doing that, or they're really doing that thing," and say, "Okay, well, here's some examples of that," and then you can't just eat the whole pie at once. You gotta cut it up into pieces and take one bite of each piece at a time and walk along the path. And I've talked about this before. It may be that you have to open yourself up to a true conversation, not one that is confrontational. And it might turn out that in the course of that conversation that might take place over many days, weeks, months, years, or a lifetime, that you never make the progress that you're looking to make. You might not be the person to be there if the progress, if that threshold is crossed. It's but you have to be very much aware of how your words are being received. Uh, the conversations we have in real life are not like the conversations that we have here. I can't just mute my mother when she's trying to say that the election was stolen. I have to make a face or something. I don't know what I do, but there's a long-term strategy that you need to apply, and it will be uniquely catered, individually catered to each conversation that you have, not only with the person, but the time and the place that you're making those conversations. So,
May I respond quick?
yeah, and Mike, you should respond after that, but you should unmute yourself first.
That's what I was hoping for. If that's okay, if you have the time.
No, you go ahead and respond. I'm just dumb, so don't worry about that.
Well, I feel like anytime that I try to bring up anything, it gets very much, one of my family members will say, "Hey, like let's shut this down," and like suggest that we don't talk about it. And I have changed my approach, because in the past I was accused of being overly passionate, and a little bit like I was kind of like hiding like that I had information. And so I'm trying to do more of like Socratic questioning. And so I know that that's something like I need to learn how to do, but I just also know that I don't know how to tiptoe around quietly enough to be able to get to the point where people are willing to even have a conversation. Like I guess that's kind of like where I'm struggling, is because every time I do bring it up, it's met with, "Let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it."
So
and I don't know.
I completely understand that perspective, especially being kind of shoot off on it. The thing is that I'd kind of echo is like, if someone doesn't want to explain the beliefs they have or defend them, they're not obligated to do that for you, right? Like you can't really force them. Like, no, we're having this conversation. But echo kind of what Johnny's saying, it's like you got to start with the individual basis. If you know the person that you're dealing with, say you had a history with them, and you've seen them get caught in a lie like several times, and they deny it even when faced with the evidence, probably not going to make a lot of progress, because they can't even be honest with themselves, right? They can't even look themselves in the mirror and say when they've messed up and when they need to be responsible. And so I don't know how they're going to be responsible for beliefs independent of them, right? When they can't be responsible for the things that make them up as a person. And so once you've kind of crossed that off going, well, that's that person, I wouldn't want to say it's hopeless. Like there's always a chance, but those are going to be the ones that are going to be hardest to kind of crack open, so to speak. But the other people that are willing to listen, a lot of it's how you say it and the passion you bring into the conversation. I know one thing that I do, and it's not a tactic, it's just how I feel about these conversations. I get super excited a lot when I talk with family members. When I finally, I'm like, oh yeah, so I'm really into these types of arguments and this. Like, like? You know, I know you're a theist. Like, do you hold to the Kalam? Do you think that's a good argument? Like, maybe we can walk through that. And once I present this open door to them of like, what's your reasonings? Like, not like here's why you shouldn't believe it or here's why I don't believe it, but like, no, I want to understand more about you, right? Like, what is it about you that believes this? And you give them this sense of I care. And if I'm gonna preface that if you don't actually have that sense, then you shouldn't be in the conversation. You should genuinely care what that person thinks, because if we're in the pursuit or the domain of finding truth, it has nothing to fear from investigation. And so you should have no problems the same way that they shouldn't. But I would add, you know, hopefully you can kind of, some people have to be kind of packaged and catered a certain way before you can get to the meat. And some people might look at that as a crappy way to do things or saying that you're disingenuous, but no, it's just, if you want to have the conversation, you want to actually help them, you have to know how they're going to respond, because what you're saying might not be egregious in any way, but they're just going to take it that way because that's the way they take certain things. And so it's definitely, there's no right answer. We're all trying to kind of figure it out with our own families. And luckily I'm in a position with my immediate family where it's not an issue. And so that's good for me in that sense, but can't tell you how many friends I have whose parents are pastors and they bring these things up to me and they're so excited that, you know, they can talk to someone at all. So I get that, you know, completely.
Jared, you don't have to have these conversations either. If you feel that you need to, because you are in a position of closeness, of familiarity, of intimacy with a family member, and you feel that you might be in the best position to get them away from extreme beliefs and practices, then maybe it is incumbent upon you to take those actions. But if you don't think that you're in that position, you don't have to take action. The prayer for serenity came to mind. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that, not to read it like, I don't know, that's that James T. Kirk. I don't know, but you need to understand that there are some things you can't change. You're not the one to change it, and sometimes your energy is better spent not fighting every fight, not fighting that fight with that person, but maybe applying it to other aspects of your community, undermining it. So don't beat your head against a wall, really, unless you really feel that you're the person to do it. And another thing is, if you've made your position on a particular group very clear, maybe the best way for them to walk away from that ideology is to be an exemplar, a great example of a person who rejects that, who cares for truth and justice and all the good things, and who rejects that because you're a good person. You don't have to get into the reasons, but like, well, you know, Jared's a good person and they think that this other thing is wrong, and there'll be a little seed in the back of their head, a seed, I don't know, a bug in their ear, saying that maybe being good and believing this isn't synonymous. Subtle messaging that you might apply rather than a direct attack could be more effective. And also finding the members of your family who are more in sync with you, building a consensus within the family until finally maybe the community of the family changes tone over time, and then the last holdout is the one who changes seemingly on their own, but truly because of actions of yours and the other members of the family.
And the point you make about being like, you know, that example, I think is great, because it's like, that's not going to indicate the truth, right? If they're a great example, that means that there must be no God or something, right? But it might just tear down the wall for them to go, okay, well, I recognize my biases. I thought atheists were like this, and that's why I didn't want to be like this, and I wanted to confirm certain things. And now you're at this scenario where they've broken down that first set of walls, right? Because now they have an example of someone like, oh, okay, they're a decent person. Not all atheists eat babies, like I thought, you know, which is something I actually heard recently from a theist, that they
just the good ones
thought that was the case. But Anyway, and so I think once it's like what Shrek said, it's like a onion, right? There's layers, man. There's layers to it. You just got to kind of peel each one until you get to the center. Hopefully, once you get to the center, they're at the point where they genuinely just want to know the answer. For me, I was in a point of desperation to look for some answer, and it didn't just come to me. But I'm so much happier now that I got those walls broken down and rebuilt back up in some way than with a sturdy foundation than I was to just accept whatever it was. More so for me, spiritual nonsense type of claims. But I hope that helps in any way.
Oh yeah, no, you guys were super helpful. Thank you. That was a lot to think about, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. We appreciate the call. It's very beneficial for so many listeners can benefit from these types of calls. So they're never to be put on the back burner compared to the theist conversations. I think these are great for the future for people to kind of analyze and look at.
Well, thanks for calling, Jared. You want to take our last caller, Jmike? You got one you prefer?
Yeah, it's my turn, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Paul's been on there for a long time. So let's get Paul up in there.
Mm-hmm.
And he wants to talk about the historicity of Moses. I don't feel like there's a lot to talk about. I think it's pretty much cut and dry. But yeah, what do you want to talk about pertaining to that?
No, yeah, I agree. It's cut and dry. There was no historical Moses. But more specifically, I mean, when I came across Philo Biblos' account of Sakaris the Wise, I'm butchering his name. There's a whole Phoenician, religious tale of a lawgiver and a savior leading them out of into their promised land in Byblos and Tyre from the Reed Sea being split. It lines up with the Baal cycle, and it lines up with this but rather sophisticated kind of telling of the cycle of Osiris's death, involving Queen Quidach and the people that were the descendants of Tatus ben Meser, the Moses of the Phoenicians. Unlike the second guy with Moses.
Yeah, Paul, there's a lot of interesting stuff. I think you're kind of maybe preaching to the choir here on this one. There is a lot of interesting historical analysis as to whether Moses was a historical figure. I know that there is examples of the story of Moses being sort of copied, pasted, and then in a very undergraduate way, small edits being made to make it a distinct. No offense to undergraduates, but some of you are plagiarizing each other's papers. We know this. But yeah, I don't think you're going to get too much of a fight here. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I can say with certainty that Moses did not exist. I don't personally believe that Moses exists, but I wasn't there. I don't have a strong feeling about it.
All the mystical characteristics.
Yeah.
If you can find just one, does that make a Moses?
No.
I feel like if you're not dealing with the lawgiver of the mythology, then why even call it Moses?
Well, I think a lot of it, if I'm not mistaken, is from some oral tradition that stems right. You're already in a weird area of where these patriarchs are going to be having essentially what's attributed to them being substantiated by what people have passed down in that, right? And then you just, I don't feel like you have to go to where you're going. I mean, it's just as simple as like the claims that surround the being itself.
Yeah.
Just they don't fit, especially when it comes to just like anatomy or biology.
Well, I mean,
so it's like and you don't have to even go that far. It's just reasonably.
Father Irenaeus. I mean, this was one of the things that Father Irenaeus was convinced Father Irenaeus that the devil must be a time traveler. That's a bit of a sarcastic way of saying it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? The evidence of the religion being this repeated, copied over thing was not hidden in the ancient world, and and Irenaeus saw it as such a problem that he had to come up with this kind of backwards time precognitive trickery rationale to lie it away.
Okay. So Paul, are you frustrated that people just accept the Moses story as historical? Are you bemused? Are you because we're not particularly moved by it, but
the research. Well, that the research that most, I feel like most of I've always been an atheist. My folks were Sikhs, and essentially Sikhs. I mean, we're pretty. The branch is pretty far astray from the religious trappings. They were both sort of de facto theists, but not out of a insistent belief that that's true, but more like a utility out of it. Although I argue that it was greatly detrimental. But I can't make a change about that.
Okay.
I feel like the vast majority of the Second Great Awakening or the First Great Awakening of Protestant Christianity is swallowing the world into its most basic, unsophisticated. Maybe that's good. Maybe it's about identifying the magical thinking and facing it head on. But I am very frustrated that living in surrounded by a culture that seems to celebrate lying and ignorance.
Paul, I wouldn't go so far as to say lying, but I'm with you. I'm frustrated living in a world that just sort of glosses over whether or not you can.
How many Gospels were written?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't take the
Yeah.
perspective that this is a lie, though. I agree with Johnny there. That's you're baking it.
No, I mean, there were so many written that obviously it was a practice to write your own Gospels in such huge numbers.
Well, so
and
my issue with that, though,
one of them.
But so I have an issue with that in the sense of like, so Paul, for example, if like my neighbor Betty or whatever, tells me about the gospel and it's in a some disagreement with one of my parents' neighbors who actually wants to talk to me about the Bible all the time. So I go talk to her and I go talk to Betty, right? Like they're going to have their interpretations. And that's what everybody does. There's the gospel of Betty and the gospel.
No, these aren't interpretations. This is invention.
That's just the way that
we're adapting angel cults and not like Nazareth didn't exist, but there were not serum. It was an angel cult,
Yeah, there's a lot of claims going on here, Paul, and I think that we're reaching toward the end of the show, and I just don't think we'll be able to get into all of that. I think that there is a substantial amount of research into the history and the literary analysis of the works of not only the Bible as it has been published and has been distributed throughout the world, but also of the Apocrypha. Looking at you, Kevin, from New York. But to say that there's a whole slew of lies, I mean, I'm not convinced by it. I'm not really interested in having this conversation, but I do appreciate you calling in, Paul, and appreciate if you've got some interesting reading that we should do. I know that I'm always looking for more reading. Could you recommend a book for us to look at? Maybe the viewers could take a look at it, some writers or some text that we could check out. What do you have for us?
Well, you could look up Atis Ben Nezer on Wikipedia.
Atis Ben Nezer on Wikipedia?
Weird spelling. It's a T-A-A-T, I think U-A-U-S or A-A-S, but Tatis. Or Philo of Biblo, Phoenician Moses, or Origin of Writing according to the Greeks.
Great. We will check out that. Thank you so much, Paul, for giving us those suggestions. I really do read a lot of the stuff that people suggest, not everything. I wanted to say something. Speaking of unusual texts that have come up recently, last week we had your friend and mine, Kevin from New York, called in, and he identified for us. Thank you so much. Internet Sacred Text Archive at sacred-text.com. I spent a little bit more time on this website. I had made some suggestions that I cast aspersions upon Internet Sacred Text Archive. I cannot speak to whether or not this website is completely legitimate or not. However, I did look through it a little bit more, and there's some interesting stuff here. I would encourage folks that if they are comfortable reading through this, this website was put together by a particular individual who wanted to make sure that these holy texts, these seminal works of philosophy and mythology and theology of the human race were collected into a place and available for free, provided that there was no copyright, so that people could read them for themselves, all in English. He's pretty funny. He's got a little bit of a personality in here where he talks about it. He's not asking you to accept these things as true. And he's just trying to make this information available. And he's trying to promote religious tolerance. I think that's a good thing. Religious tolerance. Know what other people are saying. Look at the information. Look at what they have. He's not talking about the veracity of the claims made in the holy books. He's just talking about what holy books there are. And when asked if there was a quiz, he says there is no quiz, nor is there any cake, which means this particular person is Hep. His name is John B. Hare. And shout out to John B. Hare. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm certainly going to use this website when I hear about new, unusual holy books, unusual to me. That's all I have to say about that.
Well, I would want to add two things. One, you should change the P to make it interesting. Johnny, make it interesting, Angel. And then two, I thoroughly enjoyed last week's Talk Heathen. I thought that was a great segment, and it fit right on topic of what I think just needs to be said and circumstances of getting back to what matters the most in that standpoint. So I just want to mention that to you, Johnny.
Thanks, Mike. Lloyd was fantastic, keeping us grounded, because you could spin wildly out of control when you talk with Kevin. And Kevin, I know you didn't call in this week. I don't know if you're hiding from me. You don't need to hide from me. I'm not going to bite your head off. I do want to see you improve the methodology by which you do research. And in fact, friend, I found a bunch of resources to suggest to you today for you to check this out. The CARS checklist, credibility, accuracy, reasonableness, and support. I did research into the SIFT method, which actually I had read about in a book, Red Pill, Blue Pill, the conspiracy theories that are killing us. I looked up more information on modern skepticism and a modern skeptical approach to claims and stuff like that. So I came prepared to continue our conversation, and I would like to continue the conversation the next time I'm on Talk Heathen. I will be on AXP later today, so if you want to call later today, happy to take your call if Jim will allow it. But don't feel that just because you weren't able to talk about the Apocrypha one time or some claim one time that we're done with you. I'm not done with you. I'm probably could spend a lot more time with you. And even if you never get to a better research methodology, a better way of evaluating whether a source or a claim is worth your time, there are people who are watching this show who would benefit. I've certainly benefited from my conversation with you because it's caused me to go in to evaluate my own way of looking at things. And of course, on the nonprofits, we're always looking at new articles, events, opinions, and trying to figure out whether a source is reliable, whether a claim has...
The flagship show of the ACA, by the way.
Flagship show, the NCC 1701 NP. Okay, check it out. It's on right after this. But that's really it, Kevin. Call back. Don't hide. We do care about you. I don't know if you're a Poe. I don't know if you're a prank caller. Some people say you do. Some people say you don't. But call back and let's continue that conversation. Anyone else who is in the Kevin from New York boat, call in. Let's talk about how Moldred. Where are you, Moldred? I hope you're doing well. I hope you're safe. I hope you haven't caught COVID of any kind. I want you to call in and share your Discordian view with us, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
please.
And well, that said, I would say, check out, because Johnny, you are a producer for the flagship show, The Nonprofits, I believe, right?
I am a producer along with Genemue, Malty, and Jason Techlord. And so we all work together. And of course, the hosts themselves also suggest things. So we have wonderful guests, great hosts, interesting topics, changes every week, and both contemporary issues and some longstanding perennial issues that we deal with. That's right. And you'll be on again, right, Jmike?
I will indeed.
Good.
I'll be on, and you can go into the archive and check out past episodes with Johnny, myself, and others. That comes on. Actually, you really have no reason to not watch it because it comes on right away after this show. But now that we got the kind of reiterate ways for you as the guest that could plug you and Johnny make it interesting, Angel. I just want to reiterate some ways that you could support us. If you kind of tuned in late, you can go below the video. There's a membership button, and you could do that. Get rid of the whole. I would say the restriction in how much you can say. It's nice to take away that aspect. At least I'm trying to beg for mod status on different ACA shows so that I can do that and save a few bucks. But I am going to commit myself the same way that I think everyone should, and I'm going to become a member myself. And you should become a member. Also, you can go check us out or the fan run group for Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Talk Heathen FG, as well as our fan run group for Discord at tiny.cc/ACA Discord. If you want to help us again directly, go below the live chat. There's a fundraiser we're doing that goes directly to us. We get 100% of the proceeds, and YouTube does not take the giant cut that they like to do from other people. And again, patron, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. If you are an essential worker, thing I want to say the most, since I was an Uber driver at one point, we appreciate you regardless of what you believe or don't believe. Very vital potential that we have. Yes, love rings. Very, very vital, especially with the potential of what's could be happening again here with the Delta variant. I'm hoping everybody's vaccinated and looking towards that. Don't make excuses and it might not, affect me. I have good immunity. No, get your vaccine. Attribute to the herd immunity. I'm sick of the excuses that I keep hearing.
Quit complaining about the masks. Come on, it's been a year where we had to wear the masks. Just wear it for a bit longer, and just be cautious. All right. You're not forming new habits. You're sustaining ones you should have already formed already. Enough of this nonsense. Quit crying.
Don't talk about how I don't know what I'm putting in my body and then pull up and go, can I get a Big Mac? Like 5 minutes after you say that, because it's hard for me to take you seriously.
Me too.
Anyway, if you don't believe, this is your community. If you do believe, Johnny, I know you had a pretty cool saying at the end of one show. Maybe you can end it with that or with the actual phrase.
Oh, I don't know what that cool saying was. We don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
Yeah, I can't remember either. I was gonna say what you said, but anyway, peace out. We love you. Have a good one, guys.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.